This video is sponsored by Rockler.
Well, I think this is the last of the kitchen cabinet build series. I was looking back at old footage and realized that it's been about a year since I started this project, started building the first carcasses. And I'm genuinely not sure if I should be embarrassed that it's taken this long, but I am really proud of where I've gotten to so far and how good this kitchen looks. It's pushed me both technically and creatively to build this kitchen. And I cannot wait to move into this house, start using this kitchen as a family. And speaking of family, you may have seen this on Instagram, but Ashley's pregnant and we are having a baby in December, which I'm so excited about. Honestly, it's been a part of the plan for this house from the beginning. Was like the motivation was because we were planning on having a kid, and sorry to keep it a secret for so long, but we're really excited, and I have a real deadline to get this house done. So this house needs to be done by December. I'm hoping it's gonna get done a little bit earlier than that so we can move in. That starts with finishing off these upper cabinets. I need to make some cabinet doors as well as trim it out so it's nice and sleek. This week I also am going to Rockler to pick up some new tools and hardware, and I'm gonna bring you guys along with so you can see my local Seattle Rockler store, which is super cool. But first, I'm gonna head back into the shop, start gluing up some panels.
I'm starting by making the cabinet doors, and they're going to be built out of this beautiful rift sawn white oak. From the lumberyard, it's a little thicker than I need, and it's also rough sawn, so I use my milling tools to mill it to the size that I need. I still don't have a joiner in my shop, so to square up the sides, I use a combination of a track saw and my table saw. One of the handiest things that I added to my shop since before starting this kitchen were these Rockler panel clamps. They've been instrumental in getting really flat panels throughout this entire kitchen build, and these are some of the biggest panels so far, so I'm really happy to have them. My plan is to glue these up in pairs. Basically, each glue up is going to be 2 doors. I'll cut them in half, cut them to size, and then the grain and color will match a lot better. So a lot of people don't realize this, but white oak is just a category of oak. It actually encompasses 90 different species. So color matching those different species, depending how they grew, what kind of soil they were in, the color can vary quite a bit, and I've done my best to match them up. But by pairing them like this, it's gonna make it look a little more intentional if there are color discrepancies between the different boards. So what makes these panel clamps so amazing is that they not only hold the glue up laterally, they also hold it vertically, so you don't need to use cauls. Big glue ups like this are always a bit of a wrestling match. You want to make sure you have a nice flat table. And what I also like about these panel clamps is they're so heavy that they just kind of anchor the panel down to the table surface. I put clamps at the ends to hold those together, and I also add extra clamps on top of that, as well, as you'll see in the background. I use Surefoot clamps for that, and I'm using them for this as well, for this small panel glue up. These are going to be the center doors that go over the top of the oven. I gave the main panel a couple hours to dry, and then I removed the panel clamps and added in the next glue up. This is going to be to the left of the sink. There are going to be 2 doors on that side, and this is the last glue up that I need to do. The next day, I released everything from the clamps and ran it through one last time through my thickness planer just to clean up all those glued edges. And using the crosscut sled on my table saw, I can cut them all to length.
Okay, so I am about ready to start routing out the poles. I made a couple alterations from what I did last time. I made the panels a little bit thicker, which is going to just give me a little bit extra security to prevent this from breaking off. I don't think the other ones will break, but this is something that just has made me a little bit nervous. Also, haven't cut them to width yet. I've left them a little bit wide, so if these do fail, because one of them did last time, I can trim it down and recut it, but hopefully it won't come to that.
As I did with the fridge surround, I'm cutting out the pulls with the Shaper Origin. Shaper Origin is a CNC that's handheld, and it uses this domino tape to orient itself in space with a camera that's on board. And you just basically follow a dotted line, and it makes repeatable cuts super accurately and super clean. The best way I figured out to make these finger pulls is to do 2 roughing passes first on all the panels, one at a 1/4 inch deep and one at a 1/2 inch deep, which is my final depth. After that, I swap out the bit, and then I can do the finger pull kind of insert that goes inside of the cut. This is the freaky part. This is the part that went wrong last time, mostly because you can't just drop this bit down in. You have to drop it in outside of the cut and then cut around the inside surface. So it's a little nerve-wracking, but I think I've got it figured out. So this time it worked without any issues. The only thing is I still got a good bit of burning, and I'm not sure if that's just because it's white oak and it burns easily, the density of the grain. I could probably work on the feeds and speeds a little bit, but ultimately I'm really happy. I'm just glad I didn't ruin these big panels. I spent a good bit of time sanding them up, making sure to get rid of all those scorch marks, and they ended up looking pretty darn good. And since I didn't mess them up, then I could cut them down to their final width. Each of the doors then get a pair of holes that are going to receive the European style soft close hinges. You guys have seen me install this style hinge dozens of times before. I like using this Craig drill guide, and then I also pre-drill the holes because this white oak is so dense it will snap the heads off of screws.
So I want to add a little more detail to a couple of these cabinet doors. If you've been following the series, you know that I've been adding these flutes throughout the kitchen, just in a couple different spots. They're sort of referencing the era of the house. It's a little bit Art Deco-y, and I just like it because it adds a bit of texture. So my thought is to add 3 flutes down here, much like the fridge surround, just on the 2 cabinets that flank the oven. Ooh, but one thing that I'm just realizing right now, okay, good. This is just lucky that these cups aren't so deep that they're gonna conflict with the grooves. Okay, I'm gonna pull this off, get it over to the router table, and start cutting those flutes.
One thing that I've discovered after using this router a few times is that I do need to sand the flutes pretty heavily because it leaves a bit of chatter. I also like to chamfer all the edges as soon as possible so I don't damage the doors in the process of moving them around. And the chamfers get a bit of a hand sand too. There are a couple spots in the kitchen where I've exposed plywood, and I'm gonna make a couple of these appearance panels that'll cover up that exposed plywood and make everything look like it's made out of white oak, even though the interiors of the cabinets are pre-finished maple ply. I'll save you from watching me sand everything, but I got everything up to 150 grit, and then I can apply the finish. This is Rubio Monocoat. I've used it on all the cabinets, and it's got a little bit of stain in it, so it's gonna kind of make the wood a little bit lighter and keep it more consistent across all of those varied boards. All right, I've abducted Ashley and we're about to head over to Rockler. Are you excited?
Yeah, let's go.
In all the years I've been working with Rockler, I haven't taken you guys to see my local Rockler, and I think you're in for a treat. Not only do they have everything you could possibly need as a woodworker.
Yeah, let's go check out their classroom over here.
All locations offer classes to up your skill levels.
That's beautiful.
Some curly mango in there.
From shop safety to epoxy to bowl turning, they have a ton of options. One thing that I love is that they have a bunch of tools set up for you to try out.
This thing's brilliant.
I messed around with their new router flattening jig while Ashley played with the Shaper Origin. No joke, we spent 2 hours in this store because the staff is so fun to talk to and so knowledgeable.
Just reminiscing about the old Rockler that used to be down on Stoneway here in Seattle, and it's literally the first woodworking store I ever stepped foot in. I looked at all of the tools and was just like, I don't know what any of these things do or like how to use them, and people were there to explain kind of what I could use as an entry-level woodworker, and now I'm, you know, I don't know, 15 years later.
In that time, Rockler has not stopped innovating. It's really cool to see all the new tools and jigs they come out with every single year. You saw the panel clamps that I used for the cabinet doors. They are constantly coming out with new innovations, like a new sharpening jig for lathe tools, this new juice groove routing jig, and their dust collection options can't be beat. On top of all that, they have an impeccable selection of lumber and Baltic birch plywood.
Well, had a bit of a splurge at Rockler. That was a blast. It was so fun to be in that store, and the employees, the store manager, they're such awesome people, so knowledgeable. I'm gonna be taking some classes there soon. Ashley and I have gotten so into turning lately that we're gonna take some classes there together, which is great. We also picked up some turning kits that we can use for holiday gifts, which is gonna help us out a ton, as well as we got lumber for the holiday gift. I got some odds and ends that are just good shop organization, some jigs, and I bought myself a Rotex because I have no self-control. Let me find homes for all this, and then let's get back to that build.
Now that the finish was dry, I brought the panels back in, and I just wanted to do a test fit. I'm gonna put a second coat of finish on these, but I wanted to make sure that everything lined up okay before I went any further.
Well, I popped one coat of finish on the doors and the side panels, and last night while everything was drying, I thought to myself, I wonder if those valances are gonna line up with the cabinet front. So instead of putting the second coat on, I just was like, I need to see this now. So sure enough, the valances are set back. They're actually set back an 1/8 plus a 1/16, so 3/16 back, which is kind of noticeable, and I don't like it. This is the minutia of building cabinets. It can be annoying sometimes, but I think I can fix it. The reason for the gap is because when I was calculating it, I just calculated the thickness of the door panel, and then I milled the door panels thicker because I wanted to have a little extra meat on the door handles, and so that moved it forward. But it also, you can see there's a gap right here where the hinges push it out a little bit, and so between those two things, it added 3/16 of an inch. It's fine. The valances are just screwed in. I need to move them forward, but before I set these in and scribe them to the wall, I want to make sure that these valances are in exactly the right spot. So I'm going to do that now, and then we'll scribe these up.
In the last video, I showed you guys how to make these invisible wire LED under cabinet lighting valances. If you want more details on that, I'll post a link right here to where you can watch that video. I decided to attach them just with 4 screws that are exposed because I want to be able to maintain these valances in the future. And fortunately, I did that because all I had to do now to move them forward was unscrew them, put a shim in the back, and slide them a little bit forward. So now they're perfectly flush with the door, and the gap in the back will get covered by tile. The next step is to scribe these side panels, and for that I slide them into place, making sure that the front edge is parallel with the front edge of the cabinet, and then I'll hold them in place with clamps. I then set my scribe to the same depth that I have excess underneath the valance, and then I can transfer that line to the top. I'll cut the ceiling side first, and then I'll come back and cut the side for the wall. Fortunately, all these cuts were really straight because it's brand new drywall. It was professionally installed, not installed by me. So everything slid in really easy. If the wall is a little bit more squirrely, you might have to sneak up on the cut and cut it with something other than a track saw, maybe use a jigsaw or a bandsaw.
Yep. Oh man, that's about as good as it gets. Well, thank you to people in the comments. When I attached the cabinets together, I put screws here and up there. People said that I could just unscrew these and put the screw behind there, which I wish I thought that before, but now that I'm attaching these, I'm gonna do exactly that. I'm gonna take off these plates and then screw them behind there and then reattach them so it's completely seamless.
I know a lot of people complain about YouTube comments, but honestly, I must be one of the lucky ones because I feel like my commenters, you guys, tend to be very helpful and informative. And if you haven't spent any time in the comments section before, I encourage people to go down in there. I read most of them, and they're packed with helpful tips and tricks, so go check those out. The last thing that I need to trim out on these cabinets are at the very top and the side of the leftmost cabinet. There's this little gap here. I left it there for space so that the cabinet door has room to open, but it's also out of square, so it's a little wider at the front than the back, so I need to make a tapered spacer to go in there. I started by cutting a piece to length, and then on either end I can measure out what the widest section was and the thinnest section and strike a line between those 2 points. I then went over to my bandsaw and cut it a little bit wide of that line, and then I can clean it up with a hand plane. After testing the fit, I then glued it to a piece of plywood that's the right height for that space. You'll probably notice that I left a raw edge on the front of that plywood and the end grain on that little spacer piece. And that's because I set it back about 1/4 inch and I'm gonna glue in a piece of edge banding that I'll scribe to the wall. The thinner edge banding is easier to scribe to the wall than a whole sheet of plywood. I make sure that front edge is perfectly parallel with the front of the cabinet, and then I can screw it in. So I wanted to show you guys a scribing technique, but honestly, it was so perfectly square to the wall that I didn't need to scribe it at all, so we'll save that for another video. But I ripped a strip of 1/4 inch white oak, glued onto that front edge, and it's nice and tight to the wall. To trim out the tops, on the left and the right, I used 2 different techniques. On the left side, I took a piece of edge banding that was cut to the right width, and I marked the heights out on it. Now I'm gonna leave this whole, but I'm gonna glue a piece of plywood to it, making sure that that plywood is perfectly aligned with those marks that I just made. On the right side, I was out of plywood that was the right length, so I just used a solid piece of oak. I slid that into the gap at the top, and then I glued a piece of edge banding onto it. Now, the ceiling wasn't perfectly flat, but I was able to flex this piece of edge banding up enough to kind of take care of any of the valleys that were in there. But if this ceiling was really wavy, I'd have to scribe it to fit it, but that would just be a little bit of a longer process. Once the glue had dried, I pried it loose and I could bring it back to the shop to trim off the excess. I swapped out the big old fluting bit for a templating bit, and I could run that along the side and trim off the excess. Now, I made sure to mark which side it was because it's really easy to get confused and trim off the wrong one. Okay, so I've got all the panels laid out in the shop. Everything needs to be scuff sanded. I'm doing that because I'm putting a second coat of Rubio on it. And I'm clean all that stuff up and then apply that coat. I haven't shown the second coat. I've just kind of talked about it, but you can definitely see a difference in the sheen and just the consistency of it. So I highly recommend, even though they call it monocoat, if you're using this product, I highly recommend putting 2 coats on. So let's do that, and then I can reinstall everything in the house. I called my buddy Mike Coffey right before I started this kitchen, and I asked him how he gets such a good finish on Rubio, and he said that the key is the second coat. So he scuff sands using a Scotch-Brite pad. I use a gray one. He recommended the red one. I think they're relatively similar. What this does is it creates a little bit of a tooth that is kind of imperceptible by the eye, but it's something that the finish can stick to. It also, if there's any fuzzy bits that are raised from the first coat, it gets rid of all those. I then do a thorough cleaning. This is the final coat. Everything's got to look really good. I clean before both of them with mineral spirits and then make sure that all of that dissipates before I apply the next coat. I applied the next coat with a white Scotch-Brite pad, and the only difference between the first coat and the second coat is that I'm very thorough with this one. I make sure and go across the grain with the grain, make sure and embed it as much as possible into the pores of the wood. I also wipe it immediately after I finish going over it, and then I'll go back and wipe it one more time at the very end to make sure that I didn't miss any spots that are either too shiny or not shiny enough. What you see is what you get with this finish, so how it looks now is basically how it's going to look when it's dry.
So I've been brainstorming with the Patreon crew for the last few weeks, trying to figure out if there's like a good symbol for this house or something that we can use to represent all the work that's been done here for people like you who have followed this series for over a year, and I just want to commemorate that. So the Patreon crew had several good ideas, and the thing that I kept seeing come up over and over again was this idea of something vintage, something that represents the age of the house. And I really like that because a lot of what I've been trying to do with the design in here is reference the original house, reference the original architecture, but kind of modernize it. And do you guys remember this? This is the flooring that we found underneath the floor that I'm currently standing on, and I'm pretty sure it's original to the house. It's such a cool graphic. I absolutely love it. It's been sitting on my desk. I'm planning on framing it and hanging it in the house. But I was looking at this and I was thinking, this is the graphic. This is the thing that represents what we've done in this house. So I redrew it and made it into designs for hats and for t-shirts. And I've got Ink and Emblem doing the hats with patches like this, but the patches are so freaking cool. And then Foundation Press is doing the t-shirts, and they are the ones that printed all my merch. If you own any of this stuff, you know how high quality it is. I cannot wait to own one myself. So if you've been following along from the beginning and you've enjoyed this series, go check out almfab.com. I got a bunch of different options on there: stickers, patches, hats, t-shirts, and we're only gonna make as much as people order. It's a pre-order, and then once they're ordered, I'm just gonna do one run and we're gonna be done. Just because this is like for this moment in time, for this project, and to wrap it up. So thanks everybody who's watched this series. I can't believe we're almost at the finish line, and speaking of which, I should probably finish off these cabinets.
It's pretty wild to think that this kitchen is nearly done. It feels like it's taken a long time, but I think I'm going to look back and I think I'm going to be kind of nostalgic about this time. The fact that I was able to build the kitchen that I wanted for my family is pretty amazing, and I'm so appreciative that people have followed along with this project. Hopefully it's inspired others to try their hand at cabinetry, or improve the cabinetry that you have with LEDs. There's been a lot of tips and tricks, and I hope you guys have some takeaways from that. This has been a really fun series for me. This has been a really fun build for me, and while the house is not done, there's still more to do. So what's next? This was a massive undertaking, and what's next for the channel? What's next for the house? There's lots of projects in the house. There's furniture builds, there's built-ins, there's light fixtures, and that's what I want to cover in the next video. I'm going to do a kind of review of the house, what's going on next, what's the plan, and answer your questions. So leave questions in the comments down below for the next video, but for now, check out how good these cabinet fronts look. I'm so excited, and let's get to those beauty shots.
Well, it's hard to believe that the kitchen cabinets are basically, they are done. They're done. I can stop saying basically. They look awesome. I really love how it looks in different light, like different times of day. It really, shows off some different features of the cabinets. So thanks so much for watching. Thank you to Rockler for sponsoring this video. Thank you as always to my Patreon supporters. You guys are the best. And if you want to pick up some of the pre-sale merch, the pre-sale is going to run through the month of October, and we will get the merch to people before Christmas. Go check out almfab.com, and I'll catch you on the next one.